As Denton calmed fears in Harrisburg, tensions were growing back at NRC headquarters. Roger Matson, one of the NRC's most experienced engineers, had been analyzing a stream of data from the control room. He was horrified to discover the presence of a hydrogen gas bubble above the core. The bubble could prevent cooling and eventually lead to a meltdown. Matson's report to Commissioner Hendry was blunt.
Well, what I told them was that we had a reactor that was in a condition that no one had anticipated, that the core was severely damaged. I think I called it a horse race.
How the hell do we get the bubble out of there? Do we win the horse race or lose the horse race? I don't know what we're protecting at this point. I think we ought to be moving people.
And at that point, I put my 2 cents worth in on the evacuation. I asked him why he was not making a recommendation to move people. That we thought that there should be some form of close-in evacuation.
Fearing another false alarm, Hendry stalled. For the first time, the press began to use the word meltdown.
The world has never known a day quite like today. It faced the considerable uncertainties and dangers of the worst nuclear power plant accident of the atomic age. And the horror tonight is that it could get much worse. The potential is there for the ultimate risk of a meltdown at the 3 Mile Island.
That evening before sundown, I went out and I'm looking in the sky. And I know this is kind of dumb, but I just remember the sky with the strangest colors of purples and oranges and deep blues, and it was just a really weird sky. It almost reflected the emotional turmoil that we were feeling over what was going on at 3 Mile Island. So that's what comes to mind when I think of Friday, or Black Friday as I call it.
Saturday morning, Chairman Hendry was at the point of exhaustion. The ominous prospect of a meltdown was frightening enough, but now he had a new worry, that the hydrogen bubble would mix with oxygen and create a devastating explosion. Hendry told Roger Matson to get the answers from the best nuclear physicists in the country. At the State House, the governor once again faced an agonizing decision. He could not bring himself to order an evacuation without more facts. Still, his team began preparing for the unthinkable.
We were making plans for the evacuation of not only the people, but of government, of how we were going to govern in the case of a massive meltdown and an escape of radioactivity. I mean, we were going through some very tough scenarios. And not only were we going through tough scenarios, but these were tired, overworked, very stressed people.
Back in Bethesda, reports from Matson's consultants began pouring in. The news was grim.
There was a moment of truth for Roger Matson. In calculating, he realized that he had one variable wrong. That instead of talking about an explosion that could happen in a period of a day or two, that they were already at an explosive level. At any moment the plant might explode. They were sitting on a time bomb.
But at his makeshift office near 3 Mile Island, Harold Denton was calm. He was getting a more optimistic assessment from his technical advisor, Victor Stello, a well-respected NRC engineer who was conferring with industry insiders.
I think the Washington group was getting more concerned that it might already be an explosive mixture there, and Mr. Stello and his consultants were coming to the view that there wasn't any explosive potential at all. And we just couldn't seem to bridge that technical gap.
The lives of tens of thousands of people now hinged on whose calculations proved right. In the early evening, word of the explosion theory leaked to the press. By the time Harold Denton spoke to them at 11 o'clock at night, journalists were close to hysteria.
In the state capitol were several hundred reporters who got the word that this thing may explode, and it's, you know, like a stone's throw down the river from where they're standing right at this moment. They went into the press room and they weren't after a story. What they wanted to know was, is it time to get out?
On Saturday night, I'm saying to myself, my life at about 27 years old is going to be over, because these arrogant utility operators have allowed this thing to run out of control, and they're going to kill us.
There were still 500,000 people in the Harrisburg area waiting for Thornburg's order to leave. The governor would base his decision on Harold Denton's word.
We see no possibility of hydrogen explosions in either the containment or in the reactor vessel in the near term. With regard,
you've got to understand that people in Bethesda were saying, hey, we're nervous. But we didn't listen to people in Bethesda. I don't mean that, you know, we were rude to them or cut them off, but frankly, we believed the people on site. And Harold Denton was the guy we trusted most by this time.
But it's certainly days before flammability limits would be reached, and many more days after that before detonation limits would be reached, all of which assume that we did nothing but sit on our hands here instead of getting the hydrogen out of the vessel.
Then Thornburg added some reassuring news.
President Carter will be paying a visit to the area to make a personal on-site visit, and I think this is an important vote of confidence and a further refutation of the kind of alarmist reaction that is set in some quarters.
I knew the president was arriving the next day, and there wasn't anyone on my staff at the site who thought that was anything dangerous or that we should object. And yet in Washington there was building sentiment that maybe it was an unwise thing for the president to do.
It's a great public relations gimmick to calm people down, but only if the plant doesn't explode. And as far as Matson was concerned, the plant was already explosive. Any kind of a vibration might set it off.
On Sunday morning, Victor Stello went to church. He had worked through the night trying to prove the explosion theory wrong.
And went to Mass, and I was really tired. I thought I was going to fall asleep at the sermon. And then the priest gets up and said that because of the potential for us being killed from 3 Mile Island, we're going to have general absolution.
The bishop has said, George, you're the pastor. Whatever you need to do, whatever you need to say, is up to you to do. You need make no calls to me, ask for any permissions, and that's how we decided to give general absolution. But he also said, I've been in...
This is a sacrament in the Catholic faith reserved when death is imminent. It is only given when people are going into battle and they might die. So they are absolved of all of their sins. Very difficult and emotional kind of a thing. A very difficult time. And then the anger was really bad. What we had done to these people, just outrageous. We had frightened them so bad. They thought they were going to die.
While Stello attended church, Roger Matson raced to Harrisburg. He set off from Washington, determined to reach 3 Mile Island before the president arrived. At the airport, he found Denton and Stello waiting to greet the president's helicopter.
Here comes Roger Matson into the hangar, and here's Victor Stello, the other top NRC expert. And Stello says, Matson, you son of a bitch! How could you be spreading these rumors around about this hydrogen bubble? And Matson is saying, you know, Victor, that bubble is ready to explode, and if you can't see that, you're crazy. And they're screaming back and forth at each other inside this hangar. This had to be a fairly thrilling moment for Harold Denton as the president's deputy, because here is the president, the chief executive, due to arrive at any moment with his wife. And here are his 2 top technical experts slugging it out there in the hangar over whether or not the place is about to blow up.
Minutes later, Jimmy and Rosalind Carter landed at Harrisburg Airport. For Harold Denton, this was the moment of decision.